Can anyone guess? What did you mean by that?
It doesn't work.
Right. Well, it's actually worse than that. You don't know if it's going to work or doesn't work, right? Because now it's based on luck, right? What you're testing is yeah, exactly. The answer is you don't know. So we thought this was very interesting, right? Because this helps we believe this helps management focus because we're identifying the key areas that really seem to have the highest effect. And when we look at these things, we're not saying that you don't need a formal change management process. We're just saying, that's just an automatic byproduct of doing these 4 things. So it was going to naturally kind of help management focus on the right outcomes. Step 3, we have to test, is it true that heavy users of foundational controls outperform those, the light users, the light or occasional users of foundational controls? And we found the answer was yes. We took 2 population sets, those with the 25 highest percentile of foundational controls and those with the 25% least. And we measured their performance, and we kind of manufactured a measure here called top half count. We said for every respondent, we calculated their top half count by kind of asking, for the 25 performance measures, how many of those performance measures were you at the median or better? So your best possible score was 25 out of 25. Of your performance measures were at the median or better. And your worst potential score was 0, right? And so we found top quartile of foundational control users outperformed the bottom foundational control users. So that's nice, but how do we even focus more than that? Wouldn't it be great to be able to find out what is preventing medium performers from becoming high performers, right? And that's where we really wanted to figure out, the clusters. So how many people have used cluster analysis in their coursework? All right. So cluster analysis is, I think commercially it's used most in retailing, I think, where they basically say, hey, we're going to reconstruct buying demographics just by looking at purchasing receipts. So you can say, oh, hey, here's a group of fixed income retirees. You can tell because they buy a lot of brand, right, every week, right? Here's the affluent teenagers, and you can tell because they buy Britney Spears albums, and right here's the you can do this just by looking at their purchasing behavior, and so you can use that to do marketing campaigns and so forth. So what we did was we built clusters based on their control questions, and we seeded it with one binary measure, which was are they in the top 25 percentile and top half count. And what we found was 3 clusters. Here's what I see when I see a high controls cluster that has almost all the foundational controls. I see a low controls cluster that does almost nothing except for access and resolution, meaning they know how to issue and revoke passwords, and they have trouble ticketing systems. And I see medium controls, which they're somewhere in between. But I like to call high control, kind of intuitively, right? We're like, oh, high controls are probably the high performers. Low controls are probably the oblivious ones. But medium controls, we think they're the ones that smoke more and enjoy it less. They're probably, we're kind of hypothesizing that they're probably spending more time on controls, but we're getting the least in return. And so this is where we, when we saw this graph, we're like, we got it. We've nailed it, right? It's true, right? Here's what this graph shows. Each one of these kind of 3 things that looks like a little slider bar. It's a box plot diagram, and think of each one of them as a bell curve. The box is the 25th and 75th percentile. The thick line is the median, so the top of the bell, right? And the top and bottom of the sliders is the tips of the bell. So the high, medium, and low controls clusters are on the bottom, and then the top half count is on the y-axis, right? And here's what we see. We see high performers have the highest top half count, right, with some amount of variance. Low controls have the lowest top half count with even more variance, but look at the guys in the middle. They're somewhere in between, but they have the highest variance of them all, right? In fact, the lowest performer of them all is in the medium controls cluster, right? So it's like, man, it is true. It's like the medium controls people are the people who are just trying, many controls, but they're not getting ignition, right? They're not getting the catalytic effects of the controls like the high performers. So the next step was to say, all right, what's different about the medium performers and the high performers? In other words, are there a handful of things that's impeding medium performers from blossoming into the high performers? And so this table, what this shows is the percentage of high performers with that specified control, percentage of medium cluster with that specified control, and the difference. And we sort by the difference. And I shared with you the top two ones that had this almost discriminant quality. Do you monitor for unauthorized change? Do you have defined consequences for intentional unauthorized change? But there's something even more amazing kind of if you look further down the list. All the top 6 are change and configuration management related. Right? Do you have a formal configuration management process? Do you automate it? Do you track your change success rate? Do you provide relevant information out of your configuration management processes to other process areas? It's like, holy cow. That's amazing, right? It says that, the key problem that must be solved are in the change and configuration management issues. So step 5, what are the rewards of focusing on the foundational controls? And I shared with you kind of the decisive performance differences between high and versus medium/low, right? 8 times, 5 times, 6 times, 3 times, right? I mean, it's just this kind of amazing thing. Just one more stat that kind of makes me go, wow, that's an unexpected finding, but yet it kind of makes sense. It totally makes sense. When you look at the number of hours that these clusters dedicate towards maintenance windows, where you kind of restrict the planned changes in maintenance, high performers spend twice as much time in scheduled maintenance as medium performers and 5 times as much on low performers. Any conjectures on why that might be? Why would high performers spend 5 times as much time on planned maintenance than low performers?
Well, they're ahead of the problems. They're thinking ahead. They're fixing things before they break.
Yeah, right. They're filling up the gas tank before they go on the highway. Right, exactly. And so that's what we found. What we expected was high performers are effective and efficient, so they're going to do more work in less time. And what we found was like, well, no. What the data says is, wow, high performers says the worst thing you can do is have something blow up because you didn't spend enough time on proactive maintenance. So that's kind of a cool finding. So does this confirm deeply held intuitions? And what this does, in my mind, right, is really kind of crystallize some hypotheses that we've had and that was baked into visible ops. But from a security perspective, I think it really kind of uncovers this problem, which is that why is a common practice to focus primarily on access controls, right, when the big payoff is in change control, right? I think this is something that we were thrilled with the finding because it says that those organizations that focus on change control, no matter how much access controls you focus on, you cannot get the burst into high performance, right, until you focus on change controls. And yet, it's not a new concept from the security perspective, right? CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? All of those things are on change. So I was going to show you some system dynamics diagrams, but we have... Oh, we have 5 minutes? Okay, cool. Well, let me show you some of the theories that this seems to validate. I'll give you the first chapter of Visible Ops, right, which is the proven transformations, the codification of transformations that worked, that were distilled from comparing the transformations that failed, right? And we're going to tell this entire story using only up and down arrows, right? Stephen Katz, he was the first CISO for Citibank, and he said, Gene, when dealing with executives, stick with small numbers and primary colors, right? Gene's corollary to that is, at a certain level of seniority, that is not sufficient. You must stick with up and down, happy, sad, right? So let's see if we can tell the whole story of the necessary transformation you must make in phase 1 before you can move to phase 2 and phase 3. What we're trying to tell this mythical business executive or this IT executive or, God help us, a security executive is, say, what happens when you have a given rate of change, right? And you have an ever-increasing number of failing changes or unauthorized changes. What happens to unplanned work? Does it go up or down? Up. Does it go up a little or a lot? A lot, exactly, right. So unplanned work will go up until it consumes 100% of your work time, right? And I've seen this happen where organizations are, you call this overtime, 2 a.m. pagers, staff burnout and staff turnover.